What's up, YouTube? What's good to the kin? My name is K1N, and today we are breaking down my most recent remix, Swag Surfing. Real weapon for the sets I've been playing. Fan favorite. It's classic. A lot of people like to dance to it. Heard it once, and I was like, be flipping this shit ASAP. We're going to work top down, left to right, very fast. If you want this project file, it will be available on my Patreon for, the first tier 1 subscription. Everyone can get it. This is a breakdown I normally would do on my Patreon, but I want to kind of give everyone a little taste of, my knowledge and what I will go over on my Patreon. So here we are, full breakdown for free on YouTube. All right, working from left to right, we got the synths group, and just so you know, I do have a rack called Bass Clef's Easy Wash, and this is just going to be handling our transitions, really just doing washouts and reverbs for that build up, just so you guys can hear. It's a reverb, it's a simple reverb, and it cuts the lows when it does the reverb. Okay, so first I did separate these stems off of using just Ableton's built-in stem separator now. Available with Live 12, no sponsor. And what I did was I slapped on the swag rack. Shout out Ray Volpe. If you guys know, you know. This is his rack. He always throws an OTT with a Camel Crush. And then I went ahead and actually took out one frequency that the producer used because it was ear piercing. So this is with no effects on. We can hear just a little bit. Fire. Now with all of them on, all it does, it really beefs up the entire song. That's all it does, or beefs up the synths in the song. Now, if we go on, we got the drums in the intro group as well. I don't normally do this, but since I wanted to, whenever I make remixes, I always think of what does the crowd want? And the crowd usually wants to hear the original, some sort of it, and then I'll get into my remix. So I literally just ran with the original intro. So plays the original synths, goes into the drum fill. Fire. It plays the original. Everyone gets to shake a little bit of ass before it goes into the dubstep part. Now for the drum processing, I did put Ambassador. It is off because I couldn't afford the subscription when I did release this song, so I took it off and just boosted it on the EQ, as we can see, and I did a little bit of boost on the highs. I threw a bit of OTT. A lot of the music producers that you hear that are making beats for SD Kid, Blackboy Max, etc., are doing this little technique with an OTT on their 808s just to get this insanely distorted, crunchy 808 bass. So I just did it on the full drum rack. Doesn't matter. Sounded good. That's what the rule is. There's no rules besides making stuff sound good. So that's what we have right here. And then at the end of the verse or the intro hook, whatever you guys call it, we're going to go into a little bit of a samplifier loop. And that will go right into our fake out. Now, just to quickly touch upon the effects, let's go ahead and talk about that. We have two groups called Impact and Riser, and I have in the Risers an entirely Southside inspired effects because I pulled it from their OG sample packs. I don't know when I got these, maybe 2015, maybe 2016, but it's a lot of that trappy risers that you would hear in all those classic tracks. But yeah. Now you do hear reverb and delay, so I should go over that as well. By the way, all these effects are just simple cutting up the lows unless there's an impact that I need to have the lows in it. And if I do have an impact that's layered with another impact, I'm cutting the lows of at least one of them so those lows don't crash. All right, so on the effects group, I do have an Endless Smile and a Soothe, okay? The Soothe is just going to kind of capture any of those harsh frequencies and duck them, while the Endless Smile we're going to use as tension builders to add more texture to these risers, such as, those sweeps, those high passes, everything in here just intensifies those effects in the build-up or during transitions. Now, what you guys probably want to see is the space racks for the effects group. Now, all this is doing parallel processing, and that's going to be the name of the game of this entire video when we get into that drop. So, important concept to learn now. Now, parallel processing, pretty much all we do, let's pull up a quick little paint so you guys understand, because if you're not in Ableton, it could be a little, confusing, and I'll try my best to explain this. So parallel processing, right? We have Endless Smile at the start, right? This is endless, okay? And then we're going to go into a parallel chain. Now the parallel chain has two channels within this chain, okay? We have a dry. So Endless Smile is affecting both of these channels, and we have a wet, right? This is a dry signal, completely dry, no effects, okay? The wet signal is going to have our reverb plus delay, all right? And we can control the levels of the dry and wet signal because we did separate it like this, okay? Now, at the end of this, it'll go out as a single channel, okay? And it'll affect, the soothe or the EQ, whatever we put on after that, all right? And like I said, this is a core concept of the video. So if you don't know what parallel processing is, this is pretty much it in Ableton with an audio effects rack, okay? So in practice now, we have the dry channel, okay? And this has an envelope follower. Now, all the envelope follower is doing is taking the incoming signal, okay? And it's taking that volume, and we can see what it's doing. See how it's increasing its value with whatever volume is coming into that channel? Well, I told, hey, let's attach this envelope volume to this gain knob right here. And whenever this is detecting signal, it's going to bring the volume down of the wet channel, okay? Does that make sense? So the dry signal is always going to be overpowering the wet signal. That's it, okay? Now, why are we doing that? Well, that's because we have reverbs and delays on top of that. Now, these reverbs and delays are just pretty much soothing out those transitions. Like I said, pretty much what we're doing is we're taking these, like, say this is a riser, right? And that's like the top of the riser. We're just pretty much soothing that out when it goes away, okay? And we're soothing out the start as well. It just adds a little bit of stereo imaging if you want to get into it. It sounds good. It's been a thing. It might be a snake oil thing, but I've always done it. Might as well keep going, right? Now, that's the effects of the intro, and you guys got a little bit of sauce on that with some knowledge. Now we're getting into the fake out, which I'm trying to keep this, time consuming because people don't have that, don't have that attention span. On top of that, I did miss that I'm running compactor. Pretty much all compactor is doing is taking the build from the kick drum, okay? And it's ducking whenever the kick drum is playing, and it ducks the perfect frequencies that it gets from the incoming signal. So whatever frequencies the kick build has, it's ducking that exactly perfect over the synths, okay? Now, let's get into the drums of the drop and the fake out, and then we'll go through the cluster beep word of the drop, because there's a lot of effects. Now, during the fake out, we get past the vocals, and we go into the fake out, and it's just playing a normal hi-hat with a crash. It's just pacing. That's all it's doing. Low trap from Bad Clat's pack. That's all it's doing. With an auto pan just to, you kind of want to always make things in 3D rooms, and this is adding to that 3D atmosphere. When I broke down a lot of Crank That's Patreon project files, nearly everything was panned because it creates that 3D space, doesn't make your track so 2D. Now, what these auto pans are doing, this comes from Virtual Riot. All it's doing is taking the tails and shortening them and cutting them. So instead of panning, we're using it as a volume shaper instead. Cutting the lows as well. Now, where does the second ride come into play? The second ride sounds like this. And that's like our actual open hat. And you can hear the auto pans now ducking that volume, acting as a volume shaper. Okay. So those sound like this in the drop. Bear with me as I have high CPU because my computer is old. All right, and on that bus, what I'm doing is I'm running some effects from Virtual Riot, but it has been tweaked to my liking. And overdrive just to add some extra harmonics in that top, adding a little bit more, harshness. Missed out on the drum bus, but I'm going to leave it there for you guys who download the project file. And then I have a compressor that reduces the pokes and then just a limiter. That's it. Nothing crazy. We go into a Pro C, and what a Pro C is doing is taking the input of a MIDI channel, right? Whenever my kick and snare play, it's going to duck the transient of all my cymbals, okay? So as we can see it in practice, you can hear the pump, and then with it off, you can hear all the cymbal transients happening, but we want to make sure that kick and clap or kick and snare are always above the drop. All right, we get into the drum group. The drum group is now just my kicks and claps, my build-up drums, and all that kind of stuff, like fills and stuff like that. Perks sometimes, but I'll usually keep those perks within the hi-hat and cymbal channel, just so they're side-chained with over my kick and snare. Now, the kick I chose for this is going to be an Ivory kick. Now, Ivory is complete ball knowledge. If you don't have an Ivory sample pack, you should get all volumes, 1, 2, and 3. I'm not sponsored by Ivory, but he's just the GOAT at making samples. Always been, always will be. Now, for the drum loop, as you guys can hear, we start with a reverse kick. The second drop, we're going to go ahead and introduce another drum, which is going to be a fracture drum from his Patreon. And that's going to be more of the, that rhythm, right on top of the clap. Now let's dive under the hood of these main drums. So now we got the ivory kick with a transient shaper to start us off with a little bit of attack, a little bit of pump. And we're going to go ahead and cut everything below 170 hertz in the stereo range. So everything below 170 hertz now is going to be mono. That's it, okay? And we did a little bit of boosting on the stereo imaging as well, around 4.17. Now, if we swap this over to mono, you see I'm cutting off anything below 30 hertz. I would probably do now 20 hertz moving forward with most of my projects. And honestly, with my stereo, I would also only cut under 100. A lot of records now, especially hab tracks, if you want to have a crazy time trying to deep dive a track and diagnose, go through all of the settings and stuff that they use, I don't know how to say it. If you just want to deep dive into a abstract track, his low end is so wide, but it sounds so good. So I'm just cutting everything below 100. Just sounds good on club speakers and always ensures that there's no phasing for the most part. Now, and I have a little bit of EQ just to boost down that little top end. Don't know why I did that, but I did it. Now, Newfang, this preset is not the default preset, even though it says default. I saved this preset as the default. Does that make sense? Cool. Now, all this is a Twitter. It comes from Twitter, okay? I trust some Twitter crazy people, all right? They said that if you want to preserve your transients, use this clipper. Now, if you were to export your track at 24-bit audio in Ableton, okay? Ableton will automatically take anything over 0, any data over 0, and get rid of it. It's just what it does. It's always done that. Now, if you want to have the data above 0 dB to get exported, you would export in 32-bit audio. Now, if you run a clipper, you're doing it yourself and you have a little bit more control. And that's why with my drums, something as important as my kick or my clap or my snares, I'll go ahead and use this Newfang preset because, like I said, someone on Twitter said it preserves the most transient, and I'm trusting. Okay. Now, going into the rhythm kick that goes over the clap, we just see me boosting this low end a little bit and ducking the low mids to, get it a little bit tighter on the low end. Now, how am I doing leveling and EQing on these, and why am I boosting lows and why am I not? Now, there is a cool little thing we can grab. Let's just go ahead and grab a spectrum, right? Let's grab a spectrum real fast, put it on our master channel, and then we can go ahead and change the sample size of pretty much of how much it's capturing, right? When we change this, and just changes the refresh rate. So if we go ahead and play these kicks, they should be hitting around 0. They should be. For the most part, as you can see. That's a good kick, okay? That's a good kick because your sub should be hitting around 0, right? So if your kick is ducking your sub, your kick should be filling that 0 void, right? It should be hitting up at that 0. And that's what we're getting with that. And that's how I am, doing my EQ and leveling. So if everyone always asks, well, do I keep my level at 0? I'm like, well, where's your low end hitting? And that would solve a lot of your problems on the rest of your track and how you mix down and do that kind of. All right, now let's go into the clap group. Now on top of the clap group, we have a parallel chain. Once again, we have the dry signal right here, right, which is on the bottom this time, which is totally fine. Nothing's being affected. And then on top of that, we have the wet signal, which is running a Pro R reverb and then a hybrid reverb. Now, hybrid reverbs are very, very strong. You can change the tone of your clap and everything with it, but with how I'm doing here, I'm just putting it into a room. So let's go ahead and remove these and go over what this clap sounds like without the reverbs. Now let's turn on Pro R. See, it adds a little bit more, it's in like a snare room almost like a room that's like in a studio. Then the hybrid verb kind of puts it in that arena. Much louder, right? More like a cathedral even. Now, the Pro R settings that we see right here are just a simple rich room. As you guys could tell, like I said, I wanted to put it in a studio room first, and then I really wanted to make it wet. As you can see, the dry wet being at 100%, and the Pro R is at 100% as well. Total wet signal, 100% wet signal. And then an EQ. Usually, for most tracks, I didn't do it with this one. I would EQ the reverb and where I really want it to stand out. See how it loses like the high end of the reverb? And now we have more sizzle when we get rid of that. That's why I have an EQ there. I should have done it, but I didn't. You guys are going to get that, okay? Now, if you really want to go crazy with this and really want to preserve that transient, we can once again put the envelope follower here and put it on the gain of the actual channel, or put a utility and duck that whenever the dry signal hits. So the reverb is only the tail. If you guys really wanted to get crazy about your mix, it's possible. People do that. Now, let's talk about the quick fill right here. Running the fills dry. There's no effects on them. There's an EQ and a utility, but they're doing nothing. Depends on where they fit in my track. Sometimes I would cut the lows out, maybe boost like something here and there, but I didn't do that. And I'm sorry, I am such a bad teacher that I didn't show you the claps I'm using. So I'm using a K1N clap, which is actually coming from a Fracture project file or his Patreon himself. And I probably just added some effects and did a little bit of tweaking, and that's why I saved it as is. And then a Sultan clap on top of that, a little bit of punchiness. And I'm making this the mono clap. So the transient, boost it all the way up with a very high pump. So this pump is really just going to shorten that sample even more. And then I cut the lows and cut out the boxy area where this is actually hitting. We go ahead and together sounds muy bien. All right. Now in the second drop for the drums, I'm adding a Subtronics rhythm clap, one of my go-to claps for most rhythm tracks, as we can hear all together. And I'm running that dry as well. I probably should have cut the lows out just to be a good little cookie. Lastly, for the drums, and I'm so sorry because I'm sure you guys want to get to the drop, but I hope that you guys learned something and didn't just skip. We have the build drum coming from a Nasco sample, or obviously Nasco's Patreon. Very strong kick with a new Fang Saturate at the end. Then we have this snare. Panning on each time, and as you guys can hear, the transient's getting lost because I have a compactor that's tied to the kick because I wanted the kick to be the strongest in the build. Now on top of that, that's like more of your EDM build-up snare, right? And now we have a trap snare under that that's being filtered up, and I'm using a frequency shifter to get the pitch very low, and it goes really high throughout the course of the build between the first and second drop, and it's panning as well. Just creating that 3D space. That's all I'm doing. Then I'm reintroducing the EDM snare with even a heavier one that's going to take away, that's going to, obviously have the other EDM snare stop, and this one's going to take full force. A lot more high end. And this one is also being panned as well, and I'm changing the pitch through a frequency shifter. Now, on top of that, I'm adding a stomp that goes through the entire drop where it gets too fast, because sometimes in buildups, you're just like, oh my god, but this one kind of adds that rhythm. So boom, boom, boom. Like, see, you can still bop to it, right? So with all that together with the stomp, it's a little cool little trick I do. Really cool to do. You can do it with synths, you can do it with claps, you can do it with cymbals. Really good trick to do. And I'm also panning those stomps as well. We're getting into the drop now. There's a lot of ways I could do this, but let's start from the first channel and work our way up again, just like we have been, because this is going to be a doozy. So now, how I do my drops. Okay, so I obviously, you guys can tell, I mix out of my buses. Okay, I don't just do one big master. I master each bus, and then I just kind of throw a clipper at the end and call it a day. Now, how do I do that? So obviously, you guys can tell I have my drums, right? This is my drum bus. This is my vocals. This is my vocal bus, right? And obviously below that, we have my kick and snare, my cymbals, my fills, right? But we won't talk about that. Let's just talk about the buses. Then I have my synths, bus, which is like pretty much all my intro shit, all my melodic intro stuff, pads, atmosphere, samples, that kind of stuff. And then I have an effects bus, but let's get into the drop bus, okay? So all these are mixed as individual components, okay? Like layers of a cake. They all have their own little slice, they all have their own little decoration. Now we get to my mids bus, okay? So my mids bus is my drop bus. All right. And below here, we're gonna have my layer. Okay, I have a group called layers. And this sometimes could be like my pacers, okay? You'll hear what I'm talking about, pacers. It could be like my sustains. It could be fills, depending, okay? It depends. And what does it depend on? So my main basses are all going to be clipped to shit, okay? My main basses are going to be put through the ringer with saturation, distort. I use the low end, my sub, to distort my main basses completely. And that's what Crank That does. That's what a lot of people do. They throw on clippers, they throw on wave shapers, they do all this crazy stuff to get the sauce of the beefiness. Because the whole point of EDM is to learn all these rules to learn how to break them, okay? You need to know the rules to break the rules. Now, with that being said, you have Serum 2, you create this cool patch. You don't want to make it sound like Serum 2 anymore. What you want to make it sound like is something that didn't sound like it came out of Serum 2. Look at Space Lasers, look at Skrillex. It doesn't sound like it comes from Massive. It doesn't sound like it comes from FM8 or Serum 2. It sounds like something you can't recreate, and you're like, what the hell? This is crazy. This is nuts. Now, how do I do this? So in my main basses, we obviously have the main mid bass, and we have my sub, okay? And I'm clipping everything. Now, my layers aren't being clipped that much. They're just like kind of like the decorations on the cake. They're the cherry, they're the frosting, they're like the little leaf I'm gonna put in the dish. And that's why I love cooking, not just because I'm a big dude, it's just because you learn a lot from other arts and crafts and you bring it back to music. You're like, holy shit, everything's kind of intertwined. Wook moment. For that being said, we can see my layers in the pacers, and I'm going to go through all the effects. You guys see it, but I want to show you what a layer is in my layer bus. And I should have grouped it, but I didn't group it here. Bear with me, though. CPU is going crazy, but you hear the effects rising up. You hear that square 4 bass, bump, 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 bump. And then you hear one more pacer, that's the stomper, that's hitting every half a bar. So boom, 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 boom. These are the square 4 pacers real fast. Obviously, we're offsetting it by 11 milliseconds just so it's not hitting. It's a little off. We're running a VR Fat Rack, which is from his Patreon. We have an overdrive. We have adding some width with a dimension expander and a dry chain. So once again, parallel processing. Deli. This is definitely from Samplifier's rack, and I probably took apart from it. And this is going to be an LFO tool that's going to be taking the dry signal and shortening it, putting it into a filter to widen it, and then I'm EQing it, and then a dry rack, obviously. Another Samplifier rack. This is probably from a square 4 rack that I deconstructed. This shaper is going to be shaping the utility gain, so it's just going to make sure that it's really short and sweet. Without it, takes out that tail. A little bit heavier, that's all. Multiband dynamics into the final reverb bus, which is a dry chain with a 79% reverb, bringing that level down 11 dB with some fancy little bit of EQ to get rid of those highs because I need to make room for other elements in the track. Now the stomper bass is going to be 5 millisecond delay ahead, and we're going to be EQing it just to fit perfectly in that upper mid range. And we're going to be running this little chain right here with an EQ, taking out of that, utility to make the width not as much. And then we're going to increase the width. Increasing the width with a delay, very simple trick. You turn the time on versus having it like this, the sync, we turn on time, and we can bring this down. Some people like to do this, where it's like 11 or 10 seconds, and this right side's like 19 or 15. And that's going to also add delay as well, okay? I'll make that again around 45. So when you guys dissect this project file on your own, you'll see NOTT to beef that up into a shifter to, change the pitch. As you guys can see, this is without the shifter and with the pitcher. Now we're going to go ahead and throw a saturator on and then a reverb, just increasing the gain to get some distortion, reverb to add some room to it with some crazy EQing. And then we're going to boost the width again with a little bit of gain. And then obviously, since it's a layer and it's a, like I said, the frosting, the dressing on the cake, we're going to be auto panning that as well to create the 3D space, because in a drop, everything's really in the center. All right. And the effects going on in the background as well. All right. Let's get into the main basses. So in the main basses, we have the main group that is doing the clipping for the most part. We have a parallel chain. This is where the sustains are, by the way. Let's listen to it. All right, so the main basses, exactly what I was talking about in the paint right here. So the main bus chain, or the main bus, or the main basses group, okay? This is my clipping group. This is the sauce. I have a dry parallel rack, and then I have a wet rack. And this wet rack, all it's doing is putting into the universe. It's putting into a room. So I have two convolvers, one being a disperser and one being a modern church. And like I said, just going to add some reverb. It puts it into a space, okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and EQ that space to, only affect the frequencies that I want it to affect, which is, not the low end, essentially. Then we're going to go ahead into another EQ, and we're going to make everything below 100 hertz in this group mono. All right. And then we're going to go ahead and take out some of those ugly frequencies, which is in the low end. And then I'm going to clip the fuck out of it, adding just a normal analog clip with a soft clipper and increasing it by 3 dB. And that's going to add just enough distortion to these basses that I want, to have. and push it. And once again, I am looking at my spectrum on my main channel or on my master channel, and I'm seeing if it hits that 0 dB with that sub, and I'm pushing it just like this. We're going to go ahead and once again take out that low end ugliness, and then we're going to add a soothe just to catch any of those ugly frequencies as well. Default patch, but I turned it down to 2.3 versus 3. All right, so now the A main basses, we're just going to stack 3 dispersers, and the first and second one, the first one's going to attack the default note or the root note D, and then the 5th or 7th of the note, which is A, okay? And I'm just duplicating that and doing that twice again. For the drop, I am clipping them even more. I'm sorry, there's groups on groups, but it's okay. You guys are learning, and when you download the project file, hopefully you'll see what I'm explaining even deeper. So under the main bus, okay, let me just draw this. Under the main bus, we have the A group, because the drop has 2 different groups. The A section, okay, and then under this, we have something called clip them, because I want to clip them even more, okay? So I'm just grouping them up to process them again, that's all. And how am I doing that? I'm adding another parallel channel, but this time it's a little bit different. Instead of a dry channel, I'm running a low channel, and then my other channel is everything from mids to highs. So no lows in this one, just mids and highs, as the other one is just lows. Now the mids and highs one is going to have a distortion on it, that's all, to add a little bit more harmonics and grittiness to the sound. And then we're adding a saturator with another soft sine, hard clipping it, and then we're increasing the drive, okay, by 4.6, and then I can use another buzzword if you're already lost, and gain stage down at negative 3.1 dB. So I'm just, boosting that volume and then taking it back a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I have my low end still mono, taking a little bit out of the mono frequency of those ugly frequencies. Then we get into the actual sauce. Now we have 2 basses that make up the first drop. Now with no effects, it's just a massive patch. That's not playing because my massive is broke. But if you guys look, I'll show you, I'll prove it to you. Windows can't find the target of my VST. I don't know why. Now, what I can tell you and what I remember is that this massive patch is oh my god, bro, I'm gonna have to restart my Ableton. Oh my god. Before I restart Ableton, it comes from Virtual Riot's old massive pack. That's what it comes from. It's just a simple, FM lead. You guys can see all the processing right there. Processing is similar to my main bass lead. The main bass lead is probably the sauce you're looking for. It's a mid bass, pretty bass, but let's get to that after I reset Ableton. Now, if you wanted to hear what the bass I'm talking about, it really is just a mid-range bass. Like I said, FM, we're under the main basses. Main bass is A, and they're still frozen, so luckily I can preview it to you. I'm not going to unfreeze and open this up because obviously Massive isn't working for me, so I'm just going to go ahead and explain what I did for the most part, okay? Now, with this first bass, like I said, FM bass, I have a fat rack on it, which is from Virtual Riot's 2026 recent racks that he put out. Swag rack, shout out Ray Volpe, chorus to make it wider, saturator, obviously to add more distortion, and another chorus on top of that. Now, why is that? Well, that's because my mid bass, my main bass, is that disgusting dispersed bass. It's really more mono-y, and this one's going to take on top of that, okay? In the stereo imaging field. Now, this parallel processing right here that you guys can see, it's an audio effect rack where my mouse is rubbing. That's probably just more reverb. That's all. It's a parallel chain with reverb, and I'm cutting more than the mid lows. I'm really just having the mid highs playing this and the highs. And then I'm using a utility to boost the gain plus the width. Now, remember, if you boost the gain of this lead plus the main bass into a saturator, then another saturator, you can already imagine how much that low end is being distorted by all these other elements, okay? So pretty much all I'm doing is I'm pushing as much as I can to get a clean sound, but still distorted in your face, right? And all these effects, like I said earlier, they add up into the whole point of saying, hey, the Massive sound, or it comes from Massive, but all these effects make it sound like it's not really from Massive. And it just has this crazy stereo imaging. You can hear it wrap around your head a little bit. Well, this main bass, on the other hand, which I will unfreeze, but it's going to freeze my computer, and we'll break down each one a little bit more. So now we're going to unfreeze this thing, and I am so sorry. So we have 2 channels, all right? The first channel is going to be a normal bass that I made. Now, this first bass that I'm making is going to be a Icon Has Kick wavetable under the digital, and this will be being affected by my LFO1. LFO2 will be a default shape as well. and then obviously a spectral table of monsters. Now, the reason that I'm doing this is because let's start with the sub and just add them as we go. The whole sound's pretty much there, but let's check out oscillator B and C. More width because we're adding unison. And that's where the monster is. So that's really like the tonal, the vowels that you're hearing. So C and A together. A little bit of phasing, so they're fighting each other for that vowelness, and then the B. Adding that width. Honestly, we really don't, because that lead on top of that is really taking over that width. No air out of this one, or did I have noise? Must have had noise. Now a comb filter that's going to be affecting everything but the sub, just to do these random boosts and frequencies with some drive. And then that's going to go into filter 2 that is doing a high pass filter. High pass filters, band pass filters are all great when you turn the mix down a little bit for those vowel-y growls. Now this one being a sustain, you can see that I have the LFO on an envelope. So every time the note's pressed, it's just sustaining that 100%. So every value of where this LFO is being affected, it's just staying up there till the note changes. Now for the effects that we're running on this, let's not even look at the hyperdimension, but let's look at the distortion. We have a sinefold, crazy wave shaping distortion that we're doing here. Boosting the lows hella, because more low end and then you do more distortion is going to fuck up the sound even way more. So more lows you add to it, like watch, let's take out the lows. See how it distorts everything even more? We're finding vowels, well, frequencies that peak that will really push the vowel more, and that's what we're doing here with this equalizer. Well, this equalizer is more meant to, you know, clean up the sound, reduce the highs a little bit, and take out that muddy frequencies. We're going to be feeding it into a multi-band compressor with the gain up. Pretty sure this is all default besides the ratio being 3:1. I know the default ratio is 4:1. We're going to be going ahead and doing a splitter, similar to what we've seen earlier, where we run 2 chains, one being a low and one being a high, and they're being split at the 210 frequency, okay, or 210 hertz. Now the high end is only going to be having a all pass filter on it with all these weird notches. That's what's great about a high pass or an all pass filter, is that it just creates these random EQs that you get different characteristics. Now we're running a convolver to put it in a room, slightly in a room. If we turn this all the way up, undo what we did. I'm just boosting it a tiny bit to put it into a room. Now a bode is like a frequency shifter. With it off, it sounds like this. With it on, that's obviously at 100% dry wet, and then, you know, we bring it down a little bit. Adds a little bit of width is really what it's doing. It's not really doing any of the frequency shifting, only by 4%. Placebo effect, probably don't even need it. Now the chorus, what that's going to do is going to overall widen the sound, while we have another distortion to distort the low end and the high end. And then we're going to balance those frequencies using a multi-band compressor. Again, OTT essentially, with the gain up, ratio down to 3:1. That's all I'm doing there. And that ends this patch. Now after this patch, we're running an EQ that has nothing on it at all, but we're running another patch that's the noise patch, okay? So on top of the bass and sub, we have this really annoying noise, which is probably just going to be our noise right here, with a ring mod effect on it. Now, without ring mod, it's just going to sound like a normal bass, or a normal noise. But once you start adding ring mod, it really adds this like really fast, and that's what we're getting here. So those two together with no effects, you're getting that grit out of that noise, as you guys can hear. I'm using a utility at the end to boost it by 16 dB, so it kind of puts up a fight a little bit with the main bass. Now, after the main bass, we're going to go ahead and use the M-Bassador, because at the time, what M-Bassador does, it pretty much just replaces your low-end frequency. So anything below 100 hertz, it replaces it with a clean sub, and that's all it's doing. It's just replacing the sub to be more clean. It's a good way to combat a bad sub. I didn't think there was really a reason to do this, but as you guys can hear, when I added the M-Bassador, it really distorts it more, because the sub, like I said, low end distorts the high end, as we can hear. Remember, we're hearing the sound with all the effects on the buses, or the groups and buses, into this dry rack that we're still adding effects to. So as you can hear it, once again, with it on, with it off, that low end is taking over and distorting the sound even more. going to go ahead and run a VR fat rack. You can see the settings right here, which is getting some of that disperser. But you get the gist, okay? I'm going to turn that off just for the sake of the video, and I'm running 4 dispersers. And those 4 dispersers are going to be placed all on G6. Why? No reason. It sounded good. And remember, there's no rules as long as it sounds good. All 4 of them are running on that G sharp. Then we're going to be running an OTT2. Don't know where I got this preset. It's forever ago. Don't know really what it changes from a normal OTT, but these are the settings right here if you do want to look. We're running an EQ with crazy notches. And then we're going to go ahead and mono everything under 105 hertz, just to make sure that sub is still mono. Lastly, we are running a clipper, just a wave shaper. And that's all that it's doing. Okay, so that is the main bass of the first drop. I'm going to go ahead and freeze this. So now the B main bass, as you guys can see, what's changing? It's literally just adding EQ and taking away from all the dispersers, okay? Now, no dispersers here on this B main bass, okay? So let's open up and dive under the hood. Obviously, we have bounced this and we are doing some fuckery on this growl. I am so sorry. But you have the growl right here, okay? So if you guys want to, download the project file, you can go through this frozen channel. But this is it bounced. We're using a shaper, and the shaper is actually going to be, we can open it up and see everything that it's affecting, okay? And really all it's affecting is these frequency ranges, okay? So I pretty much EQ'd the gain and the Q, so how much the frequency it actually affects, and it's doing these crazy movements for us. And then we're going to go ahead and use some overdrive, some more tonality. We're doing a little bit of imaging, and then these are all off as well, and then we're increasing the width a little bit. Now, the processing situation with the original growl, it's mainly coming all from the patch, adding a VR fat rack with some chorus to make it width, and then we're, taking out that lows. That's all it is. Right now, the yoi comes from Serum 2. We can open that up once I unfreeze, and this yoi will be seen most likely later as well in the second drop. Yep, which is that yoi that's always playing in the second drop. Actually becomes a bar hit in the first drop. Massive Serum 2 patch from Shadow Samples. Just a basic, preset from them. Basic, classic yoi. You know. These are the macros that I might have tuned, but otherwise I'm running it pretty dry. Here are the effects. And obviously in another Patreon video, I would break those down, but it's YouTube, and I kind of want to keep this. This is already very long. We're going to go ahead and run another VR fat rack. You guys can kind of see the repetitiveness of this processing. A disperser on G sharp 6, an OTT2 with some crazy boost in EQ and cutting out those ugly, disgusting low mids. And then we're making that bass mono once again. And that's going to be in the second drop as well, just so you guys know. It's that response. It's the turnover. And I'm just modulating the LFO rate. In the second drop, we're also running this. I can't unfreeze it because it is a massive preset. Probably one I created. If I didn't, it's from the Virtual Riot one that he posted on his Patreon, which would be all of his old presets that he hasn't used anymore from like 2011, 2016. I forget the time range. But as you can see, very similar processing that we've seen before. VR fat rack, swag rack, chorus saturator, another chorus. It was very similar to the main bass processing from the A bass, right? Then for the quick fills, we are processing under the main bass. Now, why am I doing that? Is because these fills, I actually wanted to use their low end and clip them through the saturating that we're doing later on in the processing chain, right? And why are we doing that? Because these big fills that we have, they sound at the same level of the main basses. They sound like they belong there. They're not just there in the project file, right? See how they match the level, match the vibe. That's why I'm processing those fills, not in the layer group, but I'm actually processing them in the main bass rack or the main bass group. That's pretty much the first drop. Then we run into drop 2, which is very more traditional, okay? It's still under the main bass, okay? So it's still getting all these, like, clipping and all that kind of fun stuff. But drop 2 doesn't have any effect on the group itself. The main lead that we actually hear in the drop is this. Very sweatshoppy. And this is going to be a Dubstep 2 preset sustain Canada, one of my favorite sustains from Avant. And if you guys want to go through this patch, it's one of theirs effects. I don't really feel like I need to break it down since it is a preset. It's there. I just showed it all if you guys want to copy it. I'm running a simple swag rack on it with cleaning up the low end. That's all I'm doing. We move on to the massive preset number 2. It won't even play because I can't even open it up. This was a mid bass. I'm sure when you guys get the project file, because I won't be saving this, I'll just give it to you how I had it. And if you guys have massive, you'll see it. It was just a low mid bass. That's all it was. It was a buzz bass to complement the FM bass that you guys hear. This one. As you guys can hear how wide that is, I made a mono version so it translates to the club a little bit better. And obviously we can't hear that, but there's no extra effects to go over that. And then we have the infamous sample Kick It from Bass Cannon. I have it in this because I wanted to clip it with the basses, so it sounded like it was a part of the same universe. Now for the bar hits, we hear this. Just a simple sample, that's a bar hit. Now all this processing is what's happening under the hood of the VR Fat Rack. Now why am I doing this? Good question. Usually why I would open this up is change the time, but I must have changed it and it didn't sound good. And I never, closed it. But these are the samples of the Fat Rack. We're doing a little bit of EQ on that low end, adding a reverb throw. So when the patch actually happens, we automate the reverb up so it throws it. Sounds like a ball you're throwing across the room. Now the liney patch that responds to the yoy. Now this patch right here is going to be a Cozy Kev liney patch that I made. You guys can grab it from the Patreon. This is the breakdown of it. 3 different oscillators, very vowel-y, and then we're going to go into the hyperdimension, the distortion, EQ. We're going to find the vowel of the EQ and extort that a little bit more. And we're going to split the lows, highs, put it in a universe. That universe will be a convolver, medium room, and really just stereo imaging that we're getting from here. Another multi-band compressor to boost that volume with another distortion to distort it even more. No VR Fat Rack with the VR Fat Rack. I carried this project file. And that's really it for this breakdown. The last thing is the bar hits, but you guys can hear right here. The synth fills are considered the layers because they're not being clipped by anything. They're a part of these layers right here. So that little like laser, whoosh, that's literally just not being clipped. It's dry. As you guys can see, the EQ is the only thing that are affecting these two. Now the bar hit that's happening in the first drop as well. We can break this down real fast. All it is, it's a digest version of the main bass from main bass A. Remember with the noise and everything, we can see right here. It's the same thing, just copied down. Same exact shit that you saw earlier. I'm just adding an auto pan tremolo with the amount going up so it stutters like that. So it acts more as a volume automation versus like actual panning. And then I'm adding a couple layers on top of that. The 2 layers I'm adding are these 2. A brass, just to add a little bit, wideness to the first hit. And then I'm using a sport mode effects laser with no effect to have that low end because there's nothing playing when that happens. All right, but yeah, that's really it. That's the entire drop. Vocals, very simple. They're dry. If anything, I'm running an RVox, which is just a compressor soothe with some EQ. Nothing crazy to go over that, but if you guys want to check out the full project file and stuff that I glazed over, go ahead. It's on Patreon under the first tier. Maybe I'll even add it so you guys can just buy the project file if you just want to have the project file full of sauce. My name's K1N. Thank you to the kin for always supporting me. My handles are K1N _music everywhere. Peace.